Hello, everybody. Let's wait like a minute or two for people to come in. And in the meantime, you have a task. Let's wait like a minute or two for people to come in. And in the meantime, you have a task. Let's wait like a minute or two for people to come in. I'm sorry, I had my YouTube on. That's why there was this small. So good morning. So make sure you complete, you answer the task
Good
there.
morning.
Hello, Georgina. Hello, Marcelo, Nora. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Bruna, Katia. Please write in the chat box your thoughts on what's on the slide there. What are some major problems the world faces today? This is your entry ticket. So I'll give you a few minutes to, okay, lack of empathy, attention. Good morning. Hello, everybody. Okay, thank you for answering. Please answer the question. Okay, good morning, everybody. Anxiety. I'm writing down everything you're pointing out so I can have them all here. Thank you, Bruna. Good morning, Viviane. Okay, so without further ado, let's start. So I have a question there for you, and I'd really appreciate if you could answer what you think are the major problems the world is facing today. Thank you for being here. I'm honored to be the first speaker in this wonderful event, Encontro de Férias, right? And I really appreciate your contributions in the chat. We're talking about some of the major problems the world faces today, and people are writing that lack of empathy, lack of attention, uncertainty, COVID, of course, anxiety, self-awareness, selfishness, prejudice, lack of goals. Yes, anxiety, right? A lot of anxiety everywhere. Anxiety popped up lots and lots of times. So we cannot, lack of commitment to tasks, right? Definitely, right, Viviane, lack of commitment to tasks. So we can say greed, okay. So lack of commitment. I'm writing this down because I'm going to use them all later. Okay, greed. Anything else that hasn't been mentioned? So you mentioned a lack of empathy, lack of attention, uncertainty, anxiety, self-awareness, selfishness, lack of goals, lack of commitment, greed, self-judgment. Thank you. So we can say that we have a problem, right? Would you agree with me that we are facing lots of problems in the world, right? Immediacy. Yes, so Houston, we have a problem. The world we are building is not the kind of world we would like to have in the future. It's not the kind of world we want for our children, for our grandchildren. So we have a problem. Do you all agree that we have a problem? Yes? Okay. When I keep looking to my right, no responsibility. When I keep looking to my right, it's because I'm presenting in one platform and I see your contributions on YouTube. Okay, so we have a problem, of course, right? And now, what do these images have in common for you? What do these images have in common? What do you relate these images to? I'm looking forward to your answers. What do they have in common? What are they? What are all these images about? They're games, right? They're games. They're games from what century and what decade? They're fun, they're games, entertainment. Yes, they're games. They're older games, right? They're older games, vintage games, right? Yes, there were games. They were the kinds of games that I played in the 80s or even in the 70s when I was a child in the 70s, right? Yes, I'm that old. Right. And in order to play these games, right, we needed to be self regulated, didn't we? We needed to be engaged with others. We needed to be kind. We needed to be emotionally resilient. We needed to be open, right? For example, you're talking about war, right? Oh my God, it took a lot of resilience to play war, right? Sometimes, it would take like 5 hours to play wars, right? So, what do I mean to say is that, these are what we call 21st century competencies, right? But they're not really 21st century, right? These competencies have always been important. It's not like those of us who grew up in the 20th century didn't need these competencies. Of course, we did, right? We needed all these competencies in the 20th century. But why are we emphasizing these competencies today? Why have they come to the forefront? Why are we talking about them in a more explicit way than we did when we were, I mean, when some of us were, well, all of us were children in the 20th century, right? Well, not really. Some of you may be very young, but many of us were children in the 20th century, right? So it's not like 21st century competencies are new and that only 21st century learners need them. It's just that we have become more aware of the need to develop these competencies. And why have become more aware of this? Because we've discovered that, first of all, they don't come up naturally, right? We thought in the past that certain things would just develop, they would grow naturally without, instinctively, as we thought many other things would happen. For example, there was a time when it was thought that second language acquisition would happen naturally, just with uh, comprehensible input. There was a time when we thought that one would learn how to write by reading, 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 that you didn't need to have explicit instruction in writing. Anyway, so these were certain beliefs that were prevalent in the past, and now we've become more aware of the need to pay explicit attention to certain things. And these are some of the things that we're talking about. So we've discovered that these competencies don't come up naturally. We need to value things that go beyond academic knowledge. Mere academic knowledge, or what we call cognitive skills, are not enough. Emotions and cognition are intrinsically linked. We cannot separate emotion from cognition, right? We know that the first step to learning is for your limbic system to be open and to be receptive. Otherwise, it shuts down your prefrontal cortex and no learning can take place. That's why we say that children don't learn from teachers they don't like, right? And we know that repetitive labor will be substituted by machines, right? So that's those are some of the reasons why we're emphasizing these competencies today. And also, right, as I would say, my pronto falei line, we've also discovered that we did not do a good job raising the millennials. Do you agree with me? I'm a parent of millennials. I mean, I kind of think I did a good job, but if we look at, but of course, we all make mistakes when raising our children. But if we look at millennials in general, we will see that they lack many of these skills or competencies, if you may, that are important today. And these things are showing now in the job market, right? And it's not me saying, it's the literature saying this, right? So we haven't done a good job. We have, I mean, in general, I know that these are generalizations, right? And they can't be applied to everybody. But in general, from my experience as a school leader, parents of millennials overprotected them. They were always right. The school was always wrong. They never lied. They never made mistakes. They were always brilliant. And it's not really like that, right? So they didn't develop certain skills that are now that are important in the job market, in society, etc. Right? So these are the reasons why these competencies or skills are gaining so much attention now. Um, Nowadays, we are facing after not after, but in the in the third year of the pandemic, right? Um, yeah, I'm a millennial, but it's hard to disagree, right, Bruna? Of course, there are exceptions, right? But if we look at millennials as a whole, as a body as a generation, these are things that are being noticed, right, by leaders, by in the job market, etc. Right? And yeah, we lack. Jess is saying we lack many of the soft skills. I was very protected. My emotions never had a place. I remember, Jess, listening to parents saying, "Oh, my child is not motivated." So we teachers had to entertain students all the time. They couldn't put up with some kind of work that is not always entertaining, but it's important, right? So I faced this as a teacher, as a school leader, and it contrasted with my generation, right? I'm from Generation X. Uh, we had other problems, right? that are also affected our relationships, etc. But anyway, nowadays, this year, uh, or at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, companies are facing lots of resignations from their workers. And so this is brand new. Big quit may force new focus on soft skills and success. This is brand new. So this has to do with the American workforce, but I bet it applies to other workforces as well. So how to prepare the American workforce with the increasing importance of non-cognitive skills. So there was a big focus on cognitive skills, so academic skills, academic knowledge, and not so much focus on non-cognitive skills, okay? Also, this is from the World Bank blog. Non-cognitive skills, what are they and why should we care? Right? So I'll give you 1 minute to read this and to see what the job market is looking at regarding non-cognitive skills. So you see, just skim through it, okay? I'm not going to read it to you. The purpose is for you to read, to skim through it. So, as you see, many countries are facing this challenge, right? Some are doing a better job than others. Some have started earlier than others, but we're facing this challenge of having to focus on non-cognitive skills more explicitly. We need to better address the development of these skills in order to equip students with a flexible set of skills that will allow them to thrive and continually adapt in the fourth revolution. okay? The 4R is referring to the fourth revolution. So this is an urgent need. The World Economic Forum of 2020 says that, it's funny, my slides are not, okay. I'm sorry that the slides are not appearing um, fully. It's funny because I'm using PowerPoint. Okay. So the World Economic, by 2025, there be a shortage of workers. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say how it continues. I tested the slides and I don't know what's happening here. There will be a shortage of workers with the skills that are needed in the 20 in the to work in the workforce. There will be a lack of workers with these skills. And what are these skills? Active learning, resilience, tolerance to stress, flexibility. These are the major skills that the World Economic Forum pointed out. Um, this no, it was just Jess. It was just my previous slide. At least I couldn't read the whole thing. If you could, better. Okay, but don't worry. So these are the skills that the World Economic Forum pointed out as being the most important skills that are lacking in the workforce and that will be essential in 2025, and that they predict they won't we won't have enough people with these skills. Okay, so this is the World Economic Forum of 2020. So what are these skills about? What do they tap into? If we look at the wheel of social emotional learning, they address all of these skills are important, right? Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision making, relationship skills. They are all important. And the ones that the World Economic Forum pointed out are more directly related to self-awareness and self-management. And if we look at the problems that you pointed out in the beginning, those of you who came in later, I had an entry ticket for this talk, which was to think about the problems the world is facing today. People talk about attention, self-awareness, lack of goals, lack of commitment, self-judgment, and they are exactly in this realm of self-awareness, of self-management, decision-making. They're all in the tapping into awareness, basically, right? So these are the essential skills, the social emotional learning we need to develop in our students. It's not that we have it. Many times, when I go to schools, when I talk about this, people say, "Oh, but we do this. Oh, but we talk about this." But what I mean is, does all the school talk about this? Do all teachers talk about this in an intentional, planned way, with goals, with steps, intrinsically related, combined with the curriculum? Probably not. Maybe some do it more than others. Maybe you do it more implicitly, but we need a more explicit focus on these skills. Okay. The OECD talked about the future of education and skills for 2030. And the OECD developed a learning compass. Okay. And this learning compass for 2030 foresees the need to work on well being, co agency with peers, teachers, parents, communities. The compass shows that yes, we need knowledge. Knowledge is important. Nobody's going to delete knowledge from the curriculum. Nobody's going to delete the cognitive skills from the curriculum, but they're not enough to develop the kind of citizens, the kind of workers, the kind of academics that we need for the future, for the survival of our planet, for the development of a better society. Okay, so we need to develop values, we need skills, and we need attitudes. And we are not doing a good job. And that's not me saying, it's the World Bank, it's the World Economic Forum, it's the OECD. We have very, very qualified people doing research on this. So I guess it's time to listen to them, right? So the OECD emphasizes the need for a curriculum redesign. And these are the essential characteristics of these new curricula: digital, competency-based, flexible, and personalized. This is what new curricula need to be like by 2030. Okay, digital, competency-based, flexible, and personalized. I'm not going to focus on digital today, but I'm going to focus on competency-based, flexible, and personalized. Okay, I came across this very nice artwork from Teacher Goals. If you don't follow Teacher Goals on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, please do, because they're great. They have very inspirational quotes, very interesting ideas to share. Every plant has their own requirements in order to grow, and so do people. So if you are a gardener, if you have plants, you know that you don't use the same ingredients for different kinds of plants. You have to, take care of your plant, the amount of water the plant needs, the amount of soil, and other types of ingredients that will help them grow are different for different plants. And this happens with people too. But we've been used to raising our children the same way, treating students in the classroom the same way, assessing people the same way. It's teacher goals, Rodrigo, teacher goals, okay? On Instagram, Twitter, etc. Teacher goals. So every plant has their own requirements in order to grow. Are we feeding our students with what they need in order to grow? That's my question. This week, just yesterday, I came across a very interesting framework for lesson design called ALDO, Amazing Lesson Design Outline. It's wonderful. And you can just Google it, okay? Amazing Lesson Design Outline, and you find it. It's a Google Doc. This is the first part of the what you need for lesson design. And it's about relationships first, trust and social emotional learning. So the first thing you need to do when you start your class is to build your relationship, is to build trust and work on social emotional learning. And the author, Miguel Gulen, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. I'd like to thank him. So it's a very good framework with lots of resources, right? And I use one of them. I use the checking in resource in the beginning. Not all of you were here, but I had a question for people to answer in the chat in the beginning as they came in. I didn't start with the title of my talk, okay? I started with what you call an entry ticket, okay? And I had a question, and people started. So this was a way of engaging people, engaging their mind, engaging their emotions in the talk. So these are things that we can do with our students as well, right? Even before you start your class, okay? These are called some people call these, bell activities, because they're activities you assign to students before the bell rings, so what I want to emphasize is that, this is what's being talked about, when you plan your lesson. Social emotional learning first, emotional engagement first, right? So the paradigm shift begins with assessment. That's how we will change how we deal with this. What I want to propose here is that we should change all of this with assessment. That's why I say that assessment and social emotional learning go together. That's the title of my talk. Assessment and social emotional learning go together. So first, I started by presenting you the importance of social emotional learning, right? And now I'm going to argue that assessment and social emotional learning go together. Why do they go together? Well, we cannot, and this is a meme, unfortunately, it's not showing as a meme, but it's okay. So we have to do away with assessment, traditional assessment that is only summative, that is competitive, that is punitive, authoritarian, classificatory, discriminatory, teacher centered, and based on a fixed mindset. These are things we have to throw away, we have to do away with. The society today, the world today, the needs for the future do not match with this kind of mindset for assessment, with this kind of mental model. Okay, I'm not saying that there isn't space for summative assessment. That's why I wrote only summative, but there isn't room for competition. There isn't room for using assessment for a punitive purpose, to punish students because they didn't do their homework, or to punish students because they're misbehaving, to punish students because they didn't attend all the classes. There's no room for this kind of mental model anymore. Okay, that is authoritarian. You use assessment to show power, right? So be careful. If you continue misbehaving like this, I'm going to give you a very difficult test. It's not the test that you should have because of what we've been teaching that will measure what you've been teaching, but it's the test to punish you, to show that I have the power, right? Haven't you heard this before? Unfortunately, I have. I maybe those of you who are younger haven't, because fortunately these things have changed. But I heard all of that. I'm from a time when teachers handed back tests starting from the highest grade to the lowest grade, and they called students' names, to stand up and pick up their tests. So everybody knew who had gotten the best grades, and everybody knew who had gotten the worst grades. This happened all the time. So that's what I mean by punitive, authoritarian, discriminatory, right? Teacher centered, meaning only the teacher is responsible for assessment. And based on a fixed mindset is, this is a good student, this is a bad student. Labeling rather than, you got a good grade because you worked hard, because you dedicated your time, your attention, you asked the right questions, you were engaged in the class. This is a growth mindset, meaning everybody can have a good result. And it's not a matter of it's not a yeah, Lena, I'm not yeah. So what I'm saying is, yeah, yeah, Fabiana, some of us did that, some of us were victims of that, right? So we need a growth mindset, right? We need to stop with these kinds of mindsets, right? Now, the OECD also, not sorry, not the OECD, and the slides are unformatted. The what should be behind representation, the how, action, and expressions. My PowerPoint's got a little messy here, but don't worry. So the Universal Design for Learning guidelines um, provide 3 steps for designing lessons, right? Provide multiple means of engagement, provide multiple means of representation, and provide multiple means of action and expression. So engagement has to do with the why. The representation has to do with the how, and action expression have to do with the what. And we're going to focus on the what right now, okay? So when we talk about action and representation, we need to provide options for executive functions to guide appropriate goal setting, support planning and strategy development, facilitate managing information and resources, and enhance capacity for monitoring progress. We're going to focus on this last one, enhance capacity for monitoring progress. This is what the guidelines say. And again, I'm going to give you 1 minute to read the guidelines. What words would you highlight? What are some very important words there? Could you write them in the chat box? The words that, you know, strike you, that call your attention. Okay, formative feedback, reflection, formative, reflection, reflection, reflection. Very nice. Self-monitoring, feedback. Yes. Completeness. Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, showing progress. You're great. I love it when I have a participatory audience. I don't like to talk, nonstop. Self-monitoring, fantastic. Rubrics. So, feedback. It's all about feedback. Feedback and assessment are the same thing. Assessment is feedback. Feedback is assessment. So we need feedback. And we need feedback that is, as you mentioned, informative, timely, customized, explicit, accessible, that offers guidance, that maintains progress. You see, complete, right? So you picked up all of the words that I picked up there, right? So this is what feedback should be like. So this is what we need to work on. This is what we need to change in our assessment practices, right? And formative feedback, right? As opposed to summative. Summative only takes stock of what happened. It tells you, this is what you did well, this is what you need to improve, but I'm not giving you any time to improve because we're moving on to the next lesson. We're moving on to the next level. We're moving on to the next page, whatever, right? So feedback has to be actionable. It has to provide students with the opportunity to do, to rethink, to go back, right? Otherwise, it's not formative, right? So formative assessment is assessment for learning rather than of learning. It should involve self-assessment and peer assessment. So this is where we get to what some of you commented here, that it's a social responsibility. It's not just the teacher's responsibility, right? The learning community is responsible for assessment, not just the teacher. The teacher is part of the learning ecosystem in the classroom. And the teacher, yes, is responsible for providing feedback, but the teacher shouldn't be the only person responsible for providing feedback, right? We need to develop our students' ability to provide feedback, right? And we also need to shift from assessment through instruments to assessment through competencies. What does this mean? Assessment through instruments has to do with what we've been doing all our lives, what happened to us when we were being assessed when we were at school, and what schools have been doing all along, which is adding up your grades in different instruments in order to get to an average. So, for example, in language teaching, which is the area that I've worked with most of my life, right? So you have, for example, a written test, an oral test, some homework exercises, maybe a piece of writing, oral participation, and you have grades in each one of them, and you add up the grades and reach an average. Each one of them probably taps into a different area of knowledge. For example, a writing assignment for writing. The test will probably have grammar and vocabulary, right? Oral test for oral performance, language functions, etc. So these are different areas, different competencies, if I may, in the different instruments that are added up to come up with one grade, right? This is assessment through instruments. Assessment through competencies is this inside out, okay? Because you have the competencies, you can call them the can-dos, you can call them the learning outcomes, or you can call them competencies. The student is able to blah, 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 blah. For example, the student, I'm getting an example from level 1 in language learning. The student is able to describe their daily routine using the present simple and vocabulary related to daily routines. This is a competency. You are going to assess whether the student is able to do this. How are you going to assess this? You are going to use multiple instruments, including of students' performance during the class, and you're going to ascertain at the end of the cycle, or well, for formative purposes during the cycle, so that you can give feedback and students can improve, but at the end of the cycle you will assess whether they have reached this competency fully, almost fully, if it's still developing. Please pay attention at the terminology I'm using. I'm not saying excellent, very good, good. This is terminology we also need to do away with because they are judgmental. They don't mean anything. What we need to tell students is whether they have reached the outcome, the learning outcome, the can-do statement, if they have attained the competencies that they need to have attained, okay? This is what we need to focus on. So this is assessment through competencies as opposed to assessment through instruments. Something else that we need to focus on is the separation. When we assess students, we should not mix assessment of cognitive skills and non-cognitive skills. Cognitive skills have to do with knowledge and with language skills, for example. Non-cognitive skills have to do with social emotional competencies. And traditionally, we have mixed them. For example, we take points off the test for students who didn't do their homework. What's the relationship, right? I mean, did they not show that they have the knowledge that the test required because they didn't do the homework? They're not related. I'm not meaning to say that doing homework is not important, but this is about something else, okay? This is about, being committed to learning, okay? This is about responsibility. We need to develop this, and we need to give students feedback whether they are developing this, but not mixing with non-cognitive competencies, okay? I know that this is still a bit new, especially in Brazil. This is definitely still controversial everywhere, but education reform movements have emphasized the need to separate cognitive and non-cognitive skills. And there are even, certain proposals, like going gradeless, no zero policy, um, and competency-based assessment. These are basically, the most prevalent discussions in assessment reform. So I would recommend. I'm not going to get deep into this, but I really recommend you read about it. Okay. So alternative assessment, formative assessment, and competencies-based assessment will naturally lead to the development of social and emotional competencies. So that's why I say that they go together. So this is the purpose of my talk, to show to you how they go together. How, by changing your assessment paradigm, you will automatically be working on the development of social and emotional competencies. Why? For example, when you include self-assessment in your curriculum and you help students develop this idea, because it doesn't come naturally, you have to help your students develop this by the way of rubrics that will guide them. Okay, when students work with self-assessment, they develop self-perception. They learn to acknowledge their strengths, which is very important, right? Because self-efficacy is a very important skill regarding, development, right? People who do not have a sense of self-efficacy um, will not succeed because they won't think they are capable of doing things. And when you don't think you're capable of doing things, this affects your limbic system, which in turn affects your reasoning, your logical reasoning, your prefrontal cortex. Your limbic system will shut down your prefrontal cortex when you feel you are in danger, right? You have probably learned about this, right? So we need to develop students' sense of self-efficacy, right? Goal setting. They need to learn how to set goals. So by self-assessing, they will develop this ability to set goals. Okay, so this is what I'm doing well. This is what I'm not doing so well. What am I going to do in order to achieve these goals, in order to be able to do what I'm not able to do now, right? Um, this leads to reflection. And it also involves ethical responsibility, meaning I am not going to say that I know something that I don't know, because the person that is ultimately, uh, you know, affected by this is me. It's not anybody else, right? So this ethical responsibility is developed when we develop the ability to self-assess, right? Also, when we work with peer assessment, we develop social emotional skills. Why? When you look at your peers' work, you develop a different perspective. It's not how you do things, it's how other people do the same task, right? I mean, people approach the same task in different ways, especially if they are performance tasks, right? They will approach these tasks differently, and it's okay, and you can see, wow, I wrote my narrative this way, but my peer had a completely different approach to the task. How interesting. And it both worked well. Wow, isn't this great? How people can be different, right? We develop a sense of empathy for the other, right? Putting ourselves on other people's shoes. We acknowledge diversity. We are diverse. We're not the same. We're not going to record the same podcast, right? We are not going to write the same text. We are not going to have the same opinions when we look at argumentative essays, and that's okay. So we acknowledge diversity. We respect other people when we see what they're doing. Um, these kinds of work, like writing, um, oral performance, they used to be isolated, right? We wrote for the teacher. Only we read what we wrote, and the teacher read what we wrote. It was a very isolated task. When in reality, in the real world, we write for others, for society, for a lot of people. So we need to add, this authenticity to our curriculum. So we build relationships too, right? Situational analysis. And again, ethical responsibility. I have the ethical responsibility to give honest feedback to my peer because I am responsible for my peer's development. It's not just the teacher, it's not just my peer, it's the collective, it's everybody in that learning ecosystem. Everybody is responsible for everybody's learning. So we eliminate competition, right? And we use and we when we stimulate collaboration, which is what we should be doing all along, right? Because that's what we want for the future. I believe nobody here, from what I've read from your chat, from your contributions, wants a competitive society the way it is now, with all these conflicts that are going on, and people are not listening to each other. people don't understand each other, there's lack of empathy, there's lack of self-awareness, and it's not by stimulating competition that we are going to change this, right? So we need to stimulate collaboration, and by engaging students in these types of tasks, we will help them develop their social emotional skills. Retakes have become like a buzzword during the pandemic, but they shouldn't. Uh, we shouldn't do away with retakes after the pandemic, if there will be after a pandemic. I mean, after the pandemic, the world will be different, and for education, in some senses, for the good. One of the elements that teachers have learned to embrace during the pandemic is retakes, and they are here to stay. Why should we give students only one chance, only one shot at a task, when in real life we have many shots? For example, if you don't pass your driving test, you can retake it. If you don't pass your proficiency exam, you can retake it. If you don't get a good result at Enem, you can retake it the next year, or vestibular. It's not like, oh, you have taken vestibular once, so you're doomed. Um, the bar exam, you name it. What else? What other things can we retake in life, right? Most of the things in life, we can start again. We can start new jobs. We can, when we write something that is high stakes, we revise it a million times, right? I mean, we revise it depending on how high the stakes are. We ask other people to read it, right? When we're giving a very, for example, suppose, in my dream, one day I'm going to be invited to give a TED Talk, okay? Do you think I'm going to plan my TED Talk and practice it only myself? Of course not. I am going to, you know, perform to a group of peers that I think will give honest feedback, and I'm going to improve and improve and improve and improve until the last minute. I'm probably not going to keep, rethinking until the last minute. Whenever I have to write something that is going to be published, if I start 10 days before, I'm going to spend 10 days revising, and I'm going to keep revising it until the last minute. So why shouldn't school be like that? Of course, we need to think about teachers' workload, and we need to figure out a way. We don't want to overwork the teachers. We need to think about wellness. And that's why peer assessment is important, because it's not only about the teacher giving feedback, right? And when we give students the opportunity for retakes, we are encouraging resilience, self confidence, self efficacy. Yes, you can do it. And I'm going to be with you and hold your hand until you get it. Stress management, because, students will think, okay, I'm not sure I'm doing this well, but I'm going to submit it to the teacher and I'm going to get feedback. And I know the teacher will help me get it right. So this reduces stress. Self discipline, planning and organization, because I need to do it ahead of time so that I can have this opportunity of getting feedback and redoing my task, right? I can identify the problems and I can improve them. I can help solve these problems that I am facing on this task. Now, many will ask, okay, but what about the students who hands in the work at the deadline? What about the student who will do just anything because they know they will have the opportunity for retakes? My question is, one, are these students the majority or the minority of students? Two, should we make rules basing ourselves on the people that will cheat the system? Or should we make rules for most people? Should we make rules thinking that people will cheat the system? Or should we teach people that we don't expect them to cheat the system? We expect them to be honest. We expect them to be committed. And I'm not going to create rules just assuming that you are not honest and committed, because that's what we do in school today. We, we organize, this workforce for test dates to prevent students from cheating. What are we telling them? You are essentially dishonest, and I don't trust you. And what do they become? Dishonest and people we can't trust. So it becomes, this vicious cycle, right? It becomes this vicious cycle. So I know a school here in Brasilia that I really admire, where students take tests in a room and there's nobody watching them. Nobody. They are developed, they develop this sense of responsibility and ethics. When you give students this burden, it's very heavy on their shoulders. And most of the times, they will deliver. Are there exceptions? Yes, but they are exceptions. We have to stop ruling by exceptions, making educational decisions by exceptions. So if there's one thing that I think, we should change immediately, is this idea that people can't retake the tests that they did poorly on, redo their writing assignments, redo their speaking assignments. Let's give them a chance to thrive, to be successful, to do their best. Because if you look at students who pass, who only attain 60% of the knowledge they need to attain over and over again during 12 years, think about everything they have missed in their learning experience. This will have uh, long-term effects on their professional life that are going to be, you know, unfixable. And this is not me saying, this is research. Decades of behavioral economics research, decades of research on how students researchers get, they do these massive studies with students who, looking at students' grades and comparing, after many years, how they are, the salaries they're making, how their life is. And there's, students who miss like 40% over and over again, had losses in their work life and academic life forever. So we have this great responsibility to make sure our students learn, and to never and not leave anyone behind, right? And finally, assessment through projects. This is like the nirvana combination of assessment and the development of social emotional skills. Assessment through projects. Because when you engage students in project, and I'm not saying doing a project at the end of the unit in one class. No, I'm talking about real project-based learning, in which the curriculum revolves around the project and you have all the steps, okay? Um, from the entry event to the public uh, exhibition of your project, and all the steps involved there. By doing this, you involve all of these. You develop self-discipline, self-motivation, goal setting, planning, organization, empathy, respect for others, communication, relationship building, teamwork, problem identification, situation analysis, problem solving, curiosity to learn, and creative imagination. This is what we do when we work with projects. And working with projects entails all the others. It entails self-assessment, peer assessment, and retakes. So this is what I mean when I say that it all starts with assessment. Assessment cannot be an afterthought in your curriculum planning. Assessment has to be the first thought. It's like, the backwards design perspective. You start from assessment. You start thinking, what do I want my students to be able to do? What are the competencies that I want them to develop? How am I going to know that they have developed these competencies? What are real world tasks that tap into these competencies that I can use as assessment instruments? Okay, I have this. Now I'm going to plan my curriculum. So assessment has to be the first thought. And we need to change our mental models of assessment. No competition. It's not assessment is not an instrument of power. Assessment has to build, has to, build all of these. Let's go back. Has to build all of these competencies. Okay. So we're running out of time. We have 4 more minutes. I'd like to thank you for being here and for your very active participation in the chat. When I kept looking to my right, it's because I was reading the chat on my phone on YouTube. Okay. And I followed all of your contributions. So we have so many things to consider, right? Now, can you change everything from day to night? No, no. So you need to design a path towards this change in assessment, okay? A path towards this change in mental models and a path towards the development of social emotional skills every day embedded in your curriculum and not just something that some teachers do more, other teachers do less, once in a while, organically. No, there needs to be a plan, a system for the development of social emotional skills. So going back to my first question that I asked, that some of you who were present here in the beginning answered, what are the problems that we face today? And as I talk about this, I'll give you the chance to get a 10% discount on any Troika course, okay? So you can scan this QR code and it will lead you to a form. When you fill it out, you will get a voucher and you can get a 10% discount on any Troika course. So going back to what you answered, the problems we are facing in the world today: lack of lack of attention, a lot of anxiety, lack of self-awareness, a lot of selfishness, lack of goals or lack of the ability to set goals, lack of commitment, greed, lack of self-judgment. So here it is. We have built this, and one way we have built this is through our traditional way of assessing, of giving feedback to students, of judging students. There are many other reasons, but one of them is this. So one way to change this is like through assessment and through the development of social emotional skills. So thank you very much. It's time to go. And please go to my friend Paulo Dantas' talk now about innovation in education, because what I talked about and what he's going to talk about are totally interrelated. Okay? So kisses to you all. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for being here. Bye-bye.